The doorbell rang at 6:30 in the evening. It was Christmas Day. I was in my kitchen arranging the last of the appetizers for our annual family dinner. My wife Sarah was upstairs helping our twin daughters get ready. The house was filled with the warm, familiar sounds of Christmas. The gentle hum of conversations, the soft crackling of the fireplace, and the distant laughter of children playing. Everything in this house, from the hand-carved crown molding to the imported marble floors, was a testament to the life I had built. A life of hard work, dedication, and quiet pride. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world are you watching from. I walked to the door, expecting the caterer with the final course. I glanced through the frosted glass panels. The silhouette was unmistakable. Tall, regal, wrapped in an expensive coat that probably cost more than most people's cars. My grandmother, Eleanor Hastings, stood there like a queen surveying her kingdom. My heart didn't race. It didn't pound. It just gave a single hard thump inside my chest. A dull reminder of old wounds I thought had healed. Then it was still. I opened the door. My grandmother, Eleanor Hastings, stood there, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the December wind. She wore a black cashmere coat and pearls that caught the light from the porch lamp. Her eyes, sharp as ever at 89, swept past me to survey the interior of my home. Her expression was one I remembered from childhood. Calculated assessment disguised as grandmotherly affection. "Michael," she said. Her voice was crisp, authoritative. It wasn't a greeting. It was an acknowledgement. "Grandmother," I replied. My voice was steady, respectful. I had learned long ago that with Eleanor Hastings, respect was not optional. It was survival. She stepped past me without invitation, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors like a countdown. The scent of her perfume, expensive and overwhelming, filled the entryway. She hadn't been in this house for 3 years. Not since the last family gathering that ended in one of her spectacular displays of control. "Still living in the house I bought you?" she asked, her voice carrying that particular tone of amused condescension I knew so well. The words hit me like a physical blow. I froze. Every muscle in my body went rigid. Around us, the warm Christmas sounds continued. Sarah was calling down the stairs asking if our guests had arrived. The twins were arguing over whose turn it was to feed the dog. Life was happening, but I was suspended in that moment, caught between past and present. My grandmother stood in the foyer of what I had believed was my home, my sanctuary, my achievement, and with 8 simple words, she had transformed it back into what it had always been. Her property, her investment, her control over my life. The living room fell silent as my family noticed Eleanor's arrival. Sarah appeared on the staircase, beautiful in her red Christmas dress, a cautious smile on her face. The twins, Emma and Grace, peeked around the corner, their faces uncertain. They barely knew their great-grandmother. I had made sure of that. "Eleanor," Sarah said, coming down the stairs with practiced politeness. "What a surprise. We weren't expecting you." My grandmother's smile was thin, mechanical. I decided to see how the family was spending Christmas. In my house. There it was again. My house. Not our house. Not the home where we had raised our children, celebrated birthdays, weathered storms, and built memories. Her house. I found my voice, though it came out rougher than I intended. "Would you like to sit down? Dinner will be ready soon." She moved to the living room as if she owned it. Which, apparently, she did. She sat in my favorite chair, the leather armchair I had spent countless evenings in, reading bedtime stories to my daughters. Now it felt like a throne, and she was the queen holding court. My family gathered nervously around her. Sarah sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The twins flanked her, sensing the tension even if they didn't understand it. I remained standing, feeling like a guest in my own home. "The house looks well maintained," Eleanor said, her eyes cataloging everything. "Though I see you've made some changes. That kitchen renovation must have been expensive. I hope you kept the receipts. For insurance purposes." Insurance purposes. She spoke as if she was inspecting an investment property, not visiting family on Christmas. Every word was a reminder of who really held the power here. Sarah glanced at me, confusion and worry creeping into her expression. "Grandmother," I said carefully, "perhaps we should discuss this later. It's Christmas. The girls should understand how the world works." Eleanor interrupted. "They should know that nothing comes free. Everything has a price. Everything belongs to someone. Emma, my 12-year-old, spoke up with the brutal honesty of childhood. But Daddy, isn't this our house? You always said it was our home. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor's smile sharpened like a blade. Your father never told you? How interesting. I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. 20 years of carefully constructed stability was crumbling with each word. Told us what? Grace asked, her voice small. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice taking on the storytelling cadence she had used when I was a child. Except her stories were never fairy tales. They were lessons in power and control. When your father graduated from college, he had nothing. No job, no prospects, no future. So I made him an offer. I wanted to stop her. I wanted to gather my family and leave. But this was her house. Where could we go? I bought him this beautiful home. Paid for it in full. All he had to do was succeed. Build a career. Prove he was worthy of my investment. Sarah was staring at me now, the pieces falling into place. 20 years of marriage, and I had never told her the complete truth about how we got our home. I had convinced myself it didn't matter. I had been paying the property taxes, the maintenance, the improvements. In my mind, I had earned it. But ownership is ownership. And Eleanor Hastings never gave up ownership of anything. Of course, Eleanor continued. There were conditions written into the deed. The house remains mine until certain benchmarks are met. Performance metrics, you might say. My throat felt dry. What benchmarks? Success, Michael. Real success. The kind that proves you're a Hastings. Not just some middle manager coasting on family name and charity. The words hit their target perfectly. For 20 years, I had worked in corporate finance. I made a good living, supported my family, saved for my daughter's college funds. I thought I had built a respectable life. But in Eleanor's world, respectability wasn't enough. In her world, you were either a winner or a failure. There was no middle ground. I don't understand, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. What does this mean? Eleanor stood up, smoothing her coat. It means, my dear, that this house, everything in it, belongs to me until Michael proves he's worthy of the Hastings name. And frankly, at 45, time is running out. The room spun. My daughters were looking at me with confusion and hurt. Sarah's face had gone pale, and my grandmother stood there like a general who had just delivered a decisive blow in a war I didn't even know I was fighting. The deadline was always your 50th birthday, she said matter-of-factly. 5 years to become someone worthy of this gift. Or, she let the word hang in the air like a sword. We'll discuss alternatives. She walked to the door, then turned back one final time. Merry Christmas, family. Thank you for the lovely visit in my house. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like a cell door slamming shut. The house that had been our sanctuary for 20 years suddenly felt like a cage. Sarah was the first to break the silence. Michael, what just happened? What did she mean, her house? I looked at my wife, my daughters, my family, sitting in what I now understood was someone else's living room, and I realized I had to tell them the truth. All of it. The real story of how we got here, and what it was going to cost us to stay. The house I grew up in was a mansion. Not in the gaudy, nouveau riche way, but in the old money, understated elegance way that only comes from generations of accumulated wealth. It sat on 15 acres in River Oaks, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens and staff who moved like ghosts through its many rooms. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and cold. The Hastings family had built their fortune in oil, then diversified into real estate, technology, and influence. My great-great-grandfather had been a wildcatter who struck it rich in East Texas. Each generation since had multiplied that wealth through shrewd investments and strategic marriages. By the time I was born, the family name carried weight in Houston. Doors opened for Hastings men. Opportunities appeared. Success was expected, not hoped for. My grandmother Eleanor was the matriarch, the keeper of the family legacy. She had outlived 2 husbands, raised 4 children, and controlled a fortune worth hundreds of millions. She was brilliant, ruthless, and utterly convinced that wealth was meaningless unless it was earned. She had strong opinions about worthiness, about proving yourself, about separating the strong from the weak. I was her only grandson, the heir to the Hastings name and fortune. But I was also a disappointment. I wasn't aggressive enough for her liking. I wasn't hungry enough. I was too kind, too content with simple pleasures. I liked reading books more than reading financial statements. I preferred quiet conversations to power lunches. I was, in her estimation, soft. During my senior year of college, she summoned me to her study. It was a room that smelled of leather and old money, lined with first-edition books and portraits of stern-faced ancestors. She sat behind a massive desk that had belonged to my great-grandfather. "You're graduating next month," she said without preamble. "What are your plans?" I had plans. Modest ones. I had a job offer from a mid-sized accounting firm. Nothing spectacular, but it was honest work with good people. I would make enough to rent a small apartment, maybe save up for something better eventually. "I have a position at Morrison & Associates," I said. "It's a good firm. They do corporate accounting for—" She waved her hand dismissively. "Accountants are bookkeepers with college degrees. That's not a career, Michael. That's hiding." I felt the familiar weight of her disappointment settling on my shoulders. "I'm not hiding, grandmother. I'm being practical." "Practical is another word for afraid," she said, leaning back in her chair. "You have advantages other young men don't have. You have the Hastings name, the Hastings connections, the Hastings intelligence, and you're choosing to waste it on practicality." She opened a leather portfolio on her desk and removed a set of documents. "I'm going to make you an offer, Michael. Call it an investment in your potential." The documents were for a house. Not just any house, but a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in one of Houston's best neighborhoods. The price was $800,000, which in 1999 was serious money. "I will buy you this house," she said. "Fully paid. No mortgage, no debt. You will have a home worthy of a successful man, which should motivate you to become one." I stared at the real estate listing. It was a beautiful house, the kind of place I had dreamed of owning someday. Maybe in 15 years, after climbing the corporate ladder and saving every penny. "What's the catch?" I asked, because with Eleanor Hastings, there was always a catch. Her smile was thin and calculating. "No catch, just expectations. The house is yours to live in, to maintain, to enjoy. But the deed will remain in my name until you prove yourself worthy of owning it outright." "Worthy how?" "By becoming successful, Michael. Really successful. Not accounting firm successful. Hastings successful. Build something. Create value. Make the family name mean something again." She slid another document across the desk. It was a contract, written in the dense legal language that made my head spin. But the key points were clear. I could live in the house for as long as I met certain conditions. I had to maintain employment in a career with advancement potential. I had to demonstrate measurable professional growth. And I had until my 50th birthday to either buy the house from her at market value or achieve what she deemed substantial success worthy of the Hastings legacy. If I failed to meet these conditions, the house would revert to her estate. I would be evicted from my own home. "And if I don't sign this?" I asked. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp and unwavering. "Then you start your life with nothing, like everyone else. No head start, no advantages, no safety net. Just you and your accounting job in a studio apartment somewhere." I was 22 years old. The idea of owning a beautiful home, of starting my adult life in a place of substance and security, was intoxicating. I told myself I would prove her wrong about me. I would show her that I could be both kind and successful, both practical and ambitious. I signed the contract. 2 months later, I moved into the house on Magnolia Street. It was everything the listing had promised and more. Hardwood floors, crown molding, a kitchen that belonged in a magazine. I furnished it carefully, choosing each piece with pride. This was my home, my first real achievement as an adult. Or so I told myself. The early years were good. I met Sarah at a company mixer 6 months after moving in. She was beautiful, smart, and kind. She worked as a teacher at a private elementary school. When I brought her to the house for the first time, her eyes went wide. "You own this?" she asked, walking through the spacious rooms. "It's incredible." "Thanks," I said, and I believed it was mine. The monthly property tax payments came to me. I maintained the insurance. I paid for repairs and improvements. In every practical way, I was the owner. The deed being in Eleanor's name felt like a technicality, a formality that would be corrected once I proved myself. Sarah and I were married 2 years later. The wedding reception was at the house, the backyard transformed into a fairy tale with string lights and flowers. Eleanor attended, played the gracious grandmother, and gave a toast about family legacy and new beginnings. She never mentioned the contract. As far as Sarah knew, I had inherited the house or bought it with some family money. I never corrected that impression. Our daughters were born in that house. Emma first, then Grace 2 years later. I converted one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery, painting the walls myself and assembling the crib with careful attention to every screw and bolt. These were my children in my home. The deed might have Eleanor's name on it, but this was where I was raising my family. Meanwhile, my career progressed exactly as Eleanor had feared. I was competent, reliable, and thoroughly average. I moved from Morrison & Associates to a larger firm, then to a corporate position with a manufacturing company. My salary grew steadily, but not dramatically. I received good performance reviews, earned the respect of my colleagues, and provided well for my family. But I wasn't building an empire. I wasn't making headlines or deals that would put me on Eleanor's radar as a success story. I was a middle manager with a nice life, which in Eleanor's world was the same as being a failure. Every few years, she would visit. Never on holidays or special occasions. Always as a surprise inspection. She would walk through the house, noting improvements and changes, always with the air of a landlord checking on her property. "The kitchen renovation looks expensive," she said after one visit. "I hope you're not over-improving my asset." Her asset. Never our home. Always her asset. I tried to push it out of my mind. I had 15 years to figure it out, then 10, then 5. The deadline felt abstract, like a problem for future Michael to solve. Present Michael had birthday parties to plan, school plays to attend, and soccer games to coach. Present Michael had a life to live. But time has a way of accelerating when you're not paying attention. Birthdays came and went. The girls started middle school. Sarah and I celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary. I got promoted to senior manager, then director of finance. I was doing well by any reasonable measure. But Eleanor's measures were never reasonable. 3 months before that Christmas dinner, I received a letter from her lawyers. A formal reminder that my 50th birthday was approaching. The contract would be reviewed. My substantial success would be evaluated. I had ignored the problem for so long that I had almost convinced myself it wasn't real. The letter made it real again. I hired a lawyer to review the original contract, looking for loopholes or escape clauses. He was thorough, professional, and ultimately devastating in his assessment. "This is ironclad," he said, sliding the documents back across his desk. "The language is vague enough to give her complete discretion in determining what constitutes success, but specific enough to give her legal standing to enforce the contract. She owns the house. She can determine whether you've met her conditions. If she decides you haven't, you have no legal recourse." "What would it take to buy the house from her?" I asked. He ran the numbers. The house was now worth $2.3 million. Even if Eleanor agreed to sell it to me at the original purchase price, I would need $800,000. My net worth, after 20 years of middle-class living, was about $400,000. Most of that was in retirement accounts and the girls' college funds. I was successful enough to live comfortably, but not successful enough to buy my freedom. The night after that meeting, I sat in my study, surrounded by 20 years of family photos, and realized that I had been living a lie. This wasn't my house. These weren't my achievements. Everything I thought I had built was built on someone else's foundation, and that someone else was coming to collect. The weeks leading up to Christmas were a special kind of hell. I walked through my daily routine, making breakfast, going to work, helping with homework, kissing my wife goodnight, all while carrying the secret that our entire life was about to implode. I considered telling Sarah, but every conversation I rehearsed in my head ended with her asking why I had lied to her for 20 years. I considered confronting Eleanor directly, but I knew it would only accelerate the timeline. She would interpret any desperation as confirmation of my failure. So I lived in limbo, watching my family prepare for Christmas in a house that might not be ours much longer. Sarah bought new decorations. The girls made elaborate plans for New Year's Eve. They were excited about the future, unaware that the ground beneath their feet was shifting. On Christmas Eve, as I tucked Emma into bed, she asked me about college. She was 12, but she was already thinking ahead. "Do you think I could study abroad, Daddy? Maybe in London or Paris?" "Maybe, sweetheart," I said, my voice almost breaking. "We'll have to see. How do you tell your child that their college fund might be needed to keep a roof over their heads? How do you explain that the stability they've known their entire lives was always an illusion?" I lay awake that night, listening to Sarah breathe beside me, staring at the ceiling of a bedroom I had thought was mine, the crown molding I had painted, the ceiling fan I had installed, the memories we had made. All of it balanced on the whims of a woman who measured love and achievements and saw family as a business opportunity. When the doorbell rang the next evening, I knew. Eleanor had come to deliver her verdict. And as she stood in our foyer and asked if I was still living in the house she bought me, I understood that the evaluation was over. I had failed. The only question now was what failure would cost us. After Eleanor left, the house felt different. The same walls, the same furniture, the same Christmas tree in the corner, but everything had shifted. It was like finding out your entire life had been a movie set, and someone had just yelled cut. Sarah sat on the sofa, still in her red Christmas dress, staring at the space where Eleanor had been standing. The twins had retreated to their room, confused and frightened by the tension they didn't understand. I stood in the middle of what I had thought was my living room, trying to find words that could explain 20 years of deception. "Michael," Sarah said finally, her voice carefully controlled. "I need you to tell me everything. From the beginning. The truth." I sat down across from her, my hands shaking slightly. "When I graduated college, Grandmother offered to buy us this house. She said it was a gift, but there were conditions." "What kind of conditions?" Sarah's teacher training was showing. She was asking questions like she was trying to understand a difficult student, patient but determined to get to the truth. I had to prove myself, become successful. I had until my 50th birthday to either buy the house from her or achieve what she called substantial success worthy of the Hastings legacy. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "And if you don't, she takes the house back." The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. Sarah put her hand to her mouth. "Oh, Michael, when is your 50th birthday?" "For months," I said. "March 15th. She started to cry then. Not the dramatic sobbing of a movie scene, but the quiet, desperate tears of someone watching their world collapse. 20 years, she whispered. "We've lived here for 20 years. The girls have never known another home." "I know. I quit my job when Emma was born because we could afford for me to stay home. Because we lived in this beautiful house mortgage-free and your salary was enough." The full scope of the disaster was becoming clear. Sarah hadn't worked in 12 years. Her teaching credentials were outdated. If we lost the house, we would need 2 incomes just to afford rent somewhere else. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "When we got married, why didn't you tell me the house wasn't really ours?" I had been asking myself the same question for hours. At first, I thought I would prove her wrong. I thought I'd be successful enough to buy it from her, or successful enough that she'd just give me the deed. As time went on, it felt more and more like our home. I was paying the taxes, the maintenance, everything. It felt real, but it wasn't real. "No," I admitted. "It wasn't real." Sarah stood up and walked to the mantelpiece, where our family photos were arranged. 20 years of birthdays, vacations, school plays, Christmas mornings. All of this. Every memory we made here. It's all tainted now. "Sarah, no." She turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression I had never seen before. Not just hurt or anger, but disappointment so deep it felt like a physical weight in the room. "You let me make decisions based on a lie. I chose to be a stay-at-home mom because I thought we were secure. I turned down jobs, opportunities, my own career, because I thought we had this foundation." She gestured around the room. "But we don't have a foundation, Michael. We're living in someone else's house, and that someone else can take it away whenever she feels like it." The twins appeared in the doorway, still in their Christmas pajamas. "Mommy," Emma said, "why are you crying?" Sarah wiped her eyes quickly, switching back to mom mode. "We're just having a grown-up conversation, sweetheart. Go back to your room for a few minutes, okay?" But Grace, always the more perceptive of the two, looked directly at me. "Daddy, is great-grandmother going to take our house away?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I looked at my 12-year-old daughter, standing in the doorway of the only home she had ever known, and realized I didn't know how to answer her. "We're going to figure it out, Gracie," I said. "That's what grown-ups do. We figure things out." But as I said it, I knew I was lying again. I had no idea how to figure this out. I had 4 months to either come up with $800,000 or achieve the kind of success that had eluded me for 20 years. Neither seemed possible. After the girls went to bed, Sarah and I sat in the kitchen, surrounded by the dishes from our interrupted Christmas dinner. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unasked questions and unspoken fears. What happens now? She asked finally. I don't know, I admitted. I could try to get a loan, but I don't have the credit or income for an $800,000 mortgage. I could try to negotiate with Eleanor, but you know her. She doesn't negotiate. What about selling? If we sold the house, used the money to buy something smaller? I shook my head. She owns it. We can't sell what isn't ours. And even if she agreed to sell it to someone else, where does that leave us? We'd have to move out regardless. Sarah leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe our entire life has been built on a lie. Not a lie, I said weakly. Just complicated. She looked at me sharply. Don't minimize this, Michael. You lied to me for 20 years. Every time I talked about our house, our home, our equity, our security, you nodded and smiled and let me believe something that wasn't true. She was right, and I knew it. But admitting it felt like another kind of death. I'm sorry, I said. I'm so sorry, Sarah. Sorry doesn't pay for a new place to live. Sorry doesn't get me back the career I gave up. Sorry doesn't explain to our daughters why we have to leave the only home they've ever known. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended state. We went through the motions of normal life. The girls played with their Christmas presents. We watched movies together. We ate leftovers. But underneath it all was the constant hum of anxiety. I found myself walking through the house differently, noticing details I had taken for granted. The way the morning light came through the kitchen windows. The creaky floorboard at the top of the stairs. The marks on the doorframe where we had measured the girls' height every year on their birthdays. 20 years of life, about to be erased. I called my lawyer the day after Christmas. He was sympathetic, but not hopeful. Your best bet is to negotiate with Mrs. Hastings, he said. Maybe she'd be willing to extend the deadline, or reduce the purchase price, or work out some kind of payment plan. I almost laughed. You don't know my grandmother. She doesn't extend deadlines. She doesn't reduce prices. She tests people, and when they fail her tests, she moves on. Then you need to think about alternatives. Start looking for rental properties. Get your finances in order for a move. Prepare your family. Prepare your family. How do you prepare your family for the loss of everything they've known? That night, I sat in my study, surrounded by 20 years of tax returns, insurance documents, and improvement receipts. Everything I had thought proved my ownership of the house. Now they just looked like records of a very expensive rental agreement. I started making lists. Assets I could liquidate. Loans I might qualify for. Jobs I could apply for that might pay enough to make a difference. But every scenario I ran led to the same conclusion. I was a middle manager with middle manager savings and a middle manager salary. I couldn't compete in Eleanor's world. I never could. Around midnight, Sarah found me there, papers scattered across the desk, calculator in hand, looking for miracles in mathematics. Any luck? She asked, though her tone suggested she knew the answer. No, I said. I've run the numbers a dozen different ways. We're not going to be able to keep the house. She sat down in the chair across from my desk. I've been thinking about what your grandmother said. About proving yourself. About becoming worthy of the Hastings name. Sarah, what if she's right? The question stunned me into silence. What if you've been hiding behind practicality and comfort? What if you've never really tried to succeed because you knew you had this safety net? I wanted to argue, to defend 20 years of steady work and responsible choices. But sitting there in the study of a house I was about to lose, surrounded by evidence of a life I had thought was secure, I wondered if she might be right. It's too late now, I said. I have 4 months. You can't build a fortune in 4 months. No, she agreed. But maybe you can start. Over the next 2 weeks, something shifted in my thinking. The panic began to give way to a different kind of clarity. For 20 years, I had been playing it safe, choosing the secure option, the comfortable path. I had convinced myself that stability was success, that providing for my family was the same as building something meaningful. But Eleanor was right about one thing. I had been hiding. I had used the house, the family, the comfortable middle-class life as excuses not to take risks, not to push myself, not to find out what I was actually capable of. If I was going to lose everything anyway, maybe it was time to stop hiding. I started researching. I studied successful entrepreneurs, read business journals, analyzed market trends. I was looking for opportunity, for something I could build quickly. The answer came from an unexpected source. Emma's robotics team. I had been volunteering as a mentor, helping with the business side of their competition entries. These 12-year-olds were building incredibly sophisticated machines, but they were struggling with project management, budgeting, and documentation. They needed software that could handle complex engineering projects but was simple enough for kids to use. That was the spark. Educational project management software specifically designed for STEM programs. I knew the market because I had lived in it as a parent and volunteer. I understood the problem because I had watched talented kids struggle with it. And I had the business and financial background to understand how to build and scale a solution. I started working on the idea nights and weekends, using skills I had accumulated over 20 years but had never applied to anything truly ambitious. I reached out to educators, coaches, and program directors. I surveyed parents and students. I built a business plan that was more thorough than anything I had ever done in my corporate job. 3 weeks into January, I took a day off work and drove to Eleanor's house. It was time to stop hiding. Eleanor's house hadn't changed. It was still imposing, still perfect, still cold. The housekeeper led me to the same study where I had signed the contract 26 years earlier. Eleanor sat behind the same massive desk, reading financial reports on a tablet. She looked up when I entered, her expression unreadable. "Michael," she said, "this is unexpected. Your birthday isn't for 2 months." "I know," I said, sitting down across from her without being invited. A small act of rebellion that felt enormous. "I wanted to talk to you about the contract. There's nothing to discuss. The terms were clear. You have until March 15th to either purchase the house or demonstrate substantial success. I see no evidence of either." I pulled out my phone and opened the presentation I had been preparing. "I have a business proposition," I said. "A startup company with significant market potential. I'm looking for an investor." For the first time in my life, I saw Eleanor look genuinely surprised. "You're pitching me?" "Yes," I said. "I'm pitching you." I walked her through the entire concept. The market research, the competitive analysis, the financial projections. I showed her the early prototype I had built, the letters of intent from potential customers, the development timeline. I presented it like my life depended on it. Because it did. When I finished, Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. "Interesting," she said finally. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I need $2 million in startup capital," I said. "And because I finally understand what you were trying to teach me. Which is, that comfort is the enemy of growth. That I've been so afraid of failing that I never really tried to succeed." Eleanor set down her tablet and looked at me directly. "And you think this little software company is going to make you worthy of the Hastings name?" "I think it's going to prove that I'm not afraid anymore," I said. "Whether it makes me worthy is up to you to decide." She was quiet again, studying me with those sharp eyes. "The terms of our original contract." "Forget the original contract," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "I'm offering you a new deal. Invest $2 million in my company. If we succeed, you get your money back, plus a significant return. If we fail, I'll walk away from the house with no complaints and no contact with the family again." Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're willing to risk everything?" "Everything's already at risk," I said. "At least this way, I'm betting on myself instead of hiding behind excuses." For the first time in my life, Eleanor smiled at me. Not the thin, calculating smile I was used to, but something that looked almost like pride. "You have 60 days, she said. "Show me something real by March 15th, and we'll discuss terms." I left her house with a promise, not an agreement. But it was more than I had walked in with. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was moving forward instead of just waiting for disaster. The next 8 weeks were the most intense of my life. I quit my corporate job, cashed out my accessible retirement accounts, and threw everything into building the company. Sarah thought I had lost my mind, but she supported me. The girls helped test the software, providing feedback that proved invaluable. I hired a small team of developers, contracted with designers, and worked 18-hour days to turn the concept into reality. By March 1st, we had a working product and 3 paying customers. By March 10th, we had 12 customers and a waiting list of 50 more. On March 14th, the day before my 50th birthday, I drove back to Eleanor's house. This time, I came with contracts, customer testimonials, and revenue reports. This time, I came as an entrepreneur, not a supplicant. Eleanor reviewed everything with the thoroughness of a venture capitalist. She asked pointed questions about scalability, market penetration, and competitive advantages. She challenged my assumptions and pushed back on my projections. It was the first real business conversation we had ever had. Impressive, she said when she finished. Truly impressive. So we have a deal? I asked. Eleanor stood up and walked to the window overlooking her perfectly manicured grounds. The house is yours, Michael, she said without turning around. Free and clear. The deed will be transferred into your name by the end of the week. I felt a wave of relief so powerful I almost collapsed. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet, she said, turning back to face me. You've proven you can start something. Now you have to prove you can sustain it. I'm still investing in your company, but I'm also raising the stakes. She slid a new contract across the desk. This makes me your majority partner. If the company fails, you lose more than the house. You lose the business, the intellectual property, everything. I looked at the contract, understanding the new terms. Eleanor wasn't just giving me back my home. She was betting on my future, and she was making sure that I couldn't go back to hiding in comfort. Deal, I said, signing the contract without hesitation. As I drove home that night, I realized that Eleanor had been right all along. The house was never the real test. The house was just bait to make me take the real test. The test of whether I had the courage to risk everything for something greater than security. Whether I was willing to bet on myself. 3 years later, the company is worth $50 million. We have 200,000 users and offices in 4 cities. Eleanor sits on our board of directors and is one of our most demanding investors. She never lets me get comfortable, never lets me settle for good enough. She pushes me the way she always has, but now I understand that the pushing comes from love, not disappointment. The house on Magnolia Street is officially ours now. But more importantly, I understand what ownership really means. It's not about having your name on a deed. It's about earning the right to call something yours through the choices you make and the risks you take. My daughters know the whole story now. They understand that their great-grandmother didn't give us our home. She gave us the opportunity to earn it. They understand that success isn't about comfort or safety, but about being willing to fail in pursuit of something meaningful. Last Christmas, Eleanor came to dinner again. But this time, when she looked around the house, she smiled. Still living in the house you earned? She asked. Yes, I said. Still living in the house we earned. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of her answer.